Hello there, YouTube. I wanted to create a video just outlining how I use Reaper, the shortcuts I use, and basically a rundown of just my workflow using Reaper. First things first, I wanted to go over my settings. So there are a few things that I change around from default. So the first thing is default of the insert key is to insert a new media file. Since I work with MIDI items, mostly I changed it to new MIDI item as insert. So to do that, you go into actions, show action list, type in new MIDI item to find the action and change the shortcut to insert. Another hotkey I set up that isn't currently set up is the render selected track. So I do Control F for just rendering the track by itself, and then Alt F for post fader, and post fader meaning the volume and pan knobs and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and set those. You can set them to whatever you want, but personally those are the ones that I use. So getting around Reaper. So I use these two windows. Usually I have a 2-monitor setup, and I actually have this window here on a separate monitor and this on a separate monitor. I did there is double click to add a new track. You can do right click, insert new track, Control T, whatever, but double clicking is the fastest way to add a new track here. So once you have a new track added, you can select a VST plugin by clicking in the mixer window into one of its empty VST bays. So for example, right now, let me go ahead and add a piano. And there we have it. We have a piano. Zoom in down to 4 bars. And then insert that MIDI item there. So now that we have the proper length in place, let's go ahead and insert whole notes by drawing. So I drew a whole note there. To manipulate this note, I currently have it selected. If I don't have it selected, by right clicking and boxing somewhere else, I can deselect it, or selecting it by boxing it. So if there's multiple notes, you can select multiple notes there. The basic shift and control keys work as you would expect. So if I have 2 notes here, select this note and hold shift and click this note, it will select all notes in between. So if I had a note here as well, it will illustrate that. It doesn't select this note because it's not the same note. If I click this and hold control and click a note later, it'll just select that note without selecting any notes in between. But you can also right click, select all notes that way. You can also take each note and resize it by going to the left until the mouse turns into a little handle. And then the Alt key will actually stretch a section. So if I select these 2 notes, it will stretch all the notes in between in length. If I hold the Shift key, it will ignore the snap. So I have the snap set at 1/16 right now, and it's ignoring it. That also works with resizing and moving around. Yeah, and that's the basics of note manipulation. If I have a single note here, I can duplicate it by hitting Control D, selecting these, and Control D, and I'll have 4 notes. I can also take this 1 note and hold Control and drag out a new note. Yes, and that's the basics of note manipulation in the piano roll. So I can go ahead and put in a chord progression here real quick. Pressing space will play and pause the button. If I go to the top here, I can select a section and it will loop as long as I have this loop button on. So whatever I have selected will loop. Now the same modifier keys work for notes in the arrangement section of the program. So if I hold shift, I can find resize this, or if I let go, it will snap to 1/16. Same thing with movement. I can hold shift and move that. Now the alt modifier doesn't work on MIDI items, but it does work on wave items, wave files. So if I hold Control Alt X, I can open up a media explorer, and you can set up favorite folders here for all your media items, and you can insert MIDI items by dragging them in, and then resizing them works here, or stretching them with Alt actually works. So you'll see the waveform stretch, but I don't want to stretch this one quite yet. Let's go ahead and put for these down, and you can duplicate wave files as you could the notes in the piano roll. So, basic 4 on the floor kicks there. Alright, so some other things I do, or would be good to know while you're playing with your notes around. So I can select a bunch of different wave files here, and I can glue them within time selection. So it's just one wave item here. They're not separate objects anymore. That's something I do as well, just so I can repeat a section or whatnot. Other things I do to manipulate waveform is if I press Shift W, it will create a stretch marker. And what that does is, if I put these 3 stretch markers here, is it will stretch between the previous stretch marker and the next stretch marker, and do that. Same thing with this section, it'll just make a invisible stretch marker at the end here. So you can alter the timing of different things here if you wanted. Another thing that I also do is, if I right click, I can go ahead and do a take envelope, and usually use volume, pans, and pitch envelopes. So if I have a volume up here, I can have this fade out, and then holding shift will insert a point, and holding alt will delete a point. And then you can select a point and move it around. You can also alt click onto a section in the line and kind of change the tension this way. You can not hold alt and move both points on the end of it to kind of manipulate that. So that's how to manipulate points. That's also helpful when you're doing automation in the lane. So I could also hit this trim button and select a controllable item. Right now I can select volume, and then it will happen across multiple objects. So if I duplicate this object and then create volume stuff here, oh, that's gonna be too loud. Yeah, you can see the volume decrease and stuff like that. So to get rid of this lane, I'll just right click and clear remove envelope. We should be good to go. But this kind of, yep. So that's the basics of manipulating audio files within the program itself. Yeah. Another thing I do is sometimes if I want to control a MIDI item, so let's drag this out to a new lane. So if you have an item and you drag out to all the way to the bottom, it will signal to create a new track, and if you let go, it will create that track for you. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here, and then in our mixer add a a instrument here. Just go ahead and add massive, and then just select a random preset here. So let's do that. So now we have a festival pluck here. These are volume knobs that I can manipulate. So what you could do with this trim function is select a parameter within the plugins that you can also manipulate. So usually cutoff is one that's automated. So we can do that here. So the effect will always be different based on what the instrument is doing. So let's go ahead and see what I can change here. So let's modify this. So what I can do is if I wanted to do a per item effect here, I would go ahead and take the effect and add a MIDI setter, right? In the JS section, I'll go ahead and do MIDI setter, and these are included with Reaper itself. So I'll pick one that's not taken up. I usually pick around 100, so I'll do 110. And as I play this, I could right click MIDI learn, and then now it's controlled by this MIDI setter. I'll go ahead and illustrate that it works there. And the reason for doing this is now I can add a specific trim to this item itself, to the value, and then mess around with this, and then do crazy stuff like this. You know, just whatever, and then have that copied through for every MIDI item that I create. The problem of doing that with this modifier on the lane is it's global to that lane, and if I copy this over, this doesn't actually move over, not cleanly anyways, because I could turn on this option to copy it over, but you know, you end up having to fix a lot of things just to do that. That's why I prefer that method of adding it directly to the clip itself. And those are basically the things I do with Reaper. If anything else comes up, there are going to be separate videos. You can look forward to that. All right, I'll see you in the next video.